In this lesson, we're going to study the itertools module a little bit more. In particular, we'll look at other functions for creating iterators for efficient looping. And for start, we need to import the itertools module at the top of the file. And the first type of iterators I want you to pay attention to is called the infinite iterators. And we'll use this same sequence of values, so the days, and the first iterator we'll look at is called cycle. So it is pretty similar to the iter function, with the only difference that when the sequence runs out of values, it will cycle over, it will start the loop again from value at the index 0. So in other words, it doesn't break when it reaches the ultimate value in that list. So I'll illustrate this with the next function and itertool cycle as an argument. So it actually has to be just cycle days. I'm on Windows, so I can hold Alt Shift and press down arrow a few times to paste the copy of that statement. And as you can see, it begins with Sunday, and then as it reaches Saturday, it doesn't break. Rather, it starts from the top. All right, so that was the cycle iterator. I will comment everything out, and I'll introduce the other iterator called count. So what you can actually do with count, so I'll call the variable something like count stuff. And what you can actually do, you can specify the starting point. So the value it will start with, it is 0 by default, and then the step value. So it will start at 100 and it will increment by 10 every time we call next with count stuff as an argument. So as you can see, 100, 110, 120, 130, and so on and so forth. Of course, there are plenty of functions in this itertool module, and if we're going to study each and every one of them, that's going to take us the whole course on just the iterators. So we'll focus on some of the most interesting ones, in my humble opinion. So the one that we'll study next is accumulate. This function makes an iterator that returns accumulated sums. In other words, it can aggregate values. So for this example, I've created a new list called prices. So it has got some arbitrary numbers. And then I'll pass this list of values to the accumulate function. And then finally, we'll print the result. And the default behavior is that it's going to produce a list where each element will be a sum of current element plus the previous element. However, if we'll add max, that will mean it will now be producing a running maximum. In other words, once it finds the biggest number or the maximum number, it will just stick to it. So here, of course, it doesn't reach the maximum number 100 up until the very end of the sequence. But if we'll break this sort of perfect sequence and reshuffle the numbers in the middle, we'll see a completely different story. So now, rather than constantly increasing, the numbers will sort of go down, and then the biggest number, 100, will remain the same. And now, as you can see, after 40, it goes 50, 50, 50, and right up until the moment it meets the 100 that is bigger than 50. We can also change this argument to min, which will stand for running minimum. And you can see the effect yourself. And the last run is what we've been mentioning previously without any other arguments. The next useful function we're going to have a look at is called chain, and it allows to chain or connect sequences together. Let me comment out this code and I'll show you what I mean. Conceptually, it is similar to the string concatenation, but in this case, we can concatenate several sequences of data. For example, that will hold the result of using the itertools chain function on two sequences. One is going to be days and another is going to be prices. And of course, if we're going to use prices, so we need to uncomment that sequence here. All right, now it's done and I can write a print statement. So I'm going to be printing out a list of chain stuff. And this gives me a list of joined days and prices. So nothing too extraordinary, but it's still useful to know about this function. And finally, the last couple of functions we'll look at are drop while and take while. They act pretty much like filters. They will return values until a certain condition is met that generally will stop them. Right, so first of all, we're going to wrap it in a print statement, and then we're going to print the list. And inside of this list, we're going to use the drop while of itertools. And this drop while will take two arguments. One is going to be the conditional function, and the other is going to be the sequence of data that will test this condition on. So Alt Shift down, that will copy this line, and the other function is of course take while. And now we need to specify that test func, or the predicate function. So inside of that predicate function, we state some kind of a threshold or a trigger. So we can say that this function takes some value and checks whether that value is less than 50, for example. So if we look at the prices list for drop while, it means that it will drop all elements from that list until it will meet the element that satisfies this threshold condition. So in our case, it means that it will drop all elements to the left of that element with the value 50. And after this iterator has encountered an element that passes this threshold condition, all other elements are eligible to remain in that list. And take while will do the opposite. It will iterate over that list and keep all elements unless their value is less than 50, and after that it doesn't care. So when it will encounter an element that will not satisfy the condition, so it will be 50 or more, it will just stop iterating and finish there.